Thank you. Well, welcome, and as you know, I'm Nicola, and I have to tell you straight away that this is the first time in my 45 years that I've stood in front of this many people and talked about anything, and I think I probably told you, lots of you. And I probably bored you all last night with it as well, about how nervous I'm going to be, so I'm kind of hiding behind this so you can't see me shaking. And I'm very far out of my comfort zone, as I've said, but I did read a lot about this whole comfort zone thing before I came here today, and I think it's something that we kind of construct in our own minds to kind of stop ourselves doing this kind of thing. And I think, psychologists and people who study that say pushing yourself out of your comfort zone is something that you really should do, and it's good for you. So you can see me in the bar afterwards, and I'll let you know how good or not I feel. So why am I here? Well, I'm one half of Underwater Pistol, one half of the founding team behind Underwater Pistol, and I was invited by Shopify to talk about how Gary and I have managed to navigate a marriage and run a business for the last 17 years, a successful, hopefully successful e-commerce digital agency. Running a business is challenging, full stop, and doing it with your partner can make it even harder. But I think if you get it right, the positives definitely far outweigh the negatives. So a little bit about me and my background. I worked as a photographic agent in London for 10 years, selling the work of photographers to ad agencies, fashion brands, and magazines. And during that time, I met Gary, and after a few years of us not taking things too seriously, we decided to get married and start up this web agency, all in the space of about 1 year, so that was quite an intense year. And our decision to set up really came from the industry I was working in and seeing how that was changing, and it was kind of right at the beginning of, online images happening, and photographers were presenting their work at the time in books, but they were seeing that that just wasn't working, and they needed to put their work online to create greater reach, and it was also considerably more cost-effective for them. So Gary at that time was already designing websites, so it seemed like a nice fit for us to start a new business venture together. But as anyone who knows us very well would be able to tell you that we have quite different personalities. So embarking on a new business venture together was going to have many ups and downs. But we love's young dream and with a big new idea ready to get up and running. So an early thorny issue for us was how do we deal with those differences in personalities and how would that impact on our business? Gary is very laid back, a bit of a dreamer, some might say a bit of a softie. I was a bit more experienced in business at that point, not so wet behind the ears, perhaps a bit more hard-nosed. So he'll probably testify to that. So I would get pretty frustrated at his relaxed approach to getting jobs finished, getting money in the bank. And it all blew up one evening on our way back from a holiday. We were at Gare Station in Paris waiting for our train. Gary was waffling on about he was going to do this, he was going to do that, and I was rolling my eyes with his rather woolly plans. And I snapped and barked at him, Gary, it's all about results. So it was an absolutely key moment in both our relationship and our business, because it summed up neatly a very important principle in running a business. You have to back up the strategy with the execution. So that's really how it started. At that point, we split our responsibilities, with me on sales and business development, as I had the contacts in the industry, and Gary continued to develop the design and build side of things. So after a couple of years, we encountered, I suppose, our first big decision as a married couple in business, taking the plunge into employing staff. This can be a big step for a business, as it commits you to paying wages every month without fail. Up until then, we had used a few freelancers because our workload had increased, which was great. Using freelancers can solve lots of problems, enabling you to expand and contract as your workload dictates. But there are also some downsides. For example, you sometimes don't have their undivided attention as they're servicing other clients. Using lots of different people on multiple jobs can potentially affect the consistency of your work, and it can be hard to impose your work ethos and processes on them. So we're splitting jobs between several freelancers, which ended up doubling our workload because we had to spend, of course, a lot more time on quality assurance and project management. So we found ourselves in a bit of a catch-22. We didn't have enough of a financial buffer to make the leap to paid, reliable staff that can be developed and moulded to your ethos. Having that money in the bank can enable you to pay those wages even during the lean times. We were fairly confident there was plenty more work out there. if we had the resources to carry out the work. But as everyone knows, nothing is guaranteed when it comes to business. And whichever way you cut it, there's generally a bit of a risk. So the combination of all of these things was really the catalyst that made us transition from hiring freelance to employing full-time people, which of course didn't come without its fair share of sleepless nights and heated discussions. Bearing in mind it was just Gary and me running the business, wearing lots of different hats. We had kids at this stage as well, so they were keeping us pretty busy. And of course, we weren't sitting in a meeting room surrounded by our work colleagues. It was just us, and more often than not, we were trying to come to an agreement at our kitchen table. I might be trying to get the dinner on the table for the kids at the same time. So you can imagine these heated discussions often deteriorated into full-blown rows. I can distinctly remember me announcing one day I was resigning, at which point Gary told me, well, he'd fired me anyway, much to my annoyance that he'd got in before me. So the process wasn't scientific, based on data and analysis. At that point, it was more instinctive and emotional. We were at a crossroads with the business, making decisions about change and growth, and the questions we were asking ourselves then were, what kind of work-life balance did we want? What type of business did we want? Did we want to attract bigger clients, which results in larger fees, but the downside is increased overheads, more mouths to feed, i.e. staff and all that that entails? How many hours did we want to work? How many hours could we work? You know, particularly me, as I was very hands-on with the kids at that stage. So finding the balance between how much we wanted to earn and how much we needed. So we flip-flopped between all of these various ideas, but to cut a long story short, we agreed that hiring full-time employees was right for us and that we wanted to grow the business and not stand still. I suppose our ambition and desire to build a successful and, more importantly, sustainable business that would support us long-term kept us moving forward. And change is good. We live in an ever-changing environment, so I think it's important to embrace it and seek out change and opportunity. So our first full-time employee that we took on actually started out as a freelancer who we used all the time, a pretty easy hire. I'm looking at her now, as she has been with us ever since and is now a senior member of our team, who we're very proud of. Tari might want to stand up now. So our responsibilities shifted at that point. Gary's role kind of pivoted from being hands-on designing and building websites to more of a business development role, and I added project management to my ever-growing list of jobs. So now there are 12 of us, about half of us permanent and the other half freelance, and thankfully each decision to employ has got easier through experience. It now happens with a bit of data and analysis, some instinct, and maybe still a little bit of flying by the seat of our pants. So how do we recruit people now? Well, that comes back to our two different personalities again, and I am the data person. So we analyse employee capacity historically and ongoing, what projected work we have in the pipeline and what the buffer is. And if those figures add up, we can start thinking about taking on someone new. But Gary, on the other hand, is always looking out for talent and will frequently report excitedly to me that he's encountered someone new who'd be a great fit for the team. He'll paint a wonderful picture of the fantastic new avenues that will open up if this new colleague were to join us. And then, of course, I will bring his flights of fancy back down to earth with concepts he's not so fond of. Can we afford it? Have we enough work for them? And that's when the negotiations start over the kitchen table again. So another, big decision once you've employed people, where do you put them? Do you rent space or do you let them work remotely? I think when we first started our business, the general consensus was that it's perceived as more professional to have a physical office with staff sitting in it. And for many years, it was considered a necessary step to being taken seriously as a business. Having a traditional office, along with employing people, was something that I felt a great deal of pressure to achieve. Whilst we do have our core team in our studio that we built on our property, and we do have our team in a space in London, we employ staff and use freelancers who work remotely and aren't based in our offices. I think perceptions have changed dramatically over the years about where you are based, and lots of companies are now embracing this remote trend. I mean, I read recently this year that Amazon have employed 5,000 remote staff. And of course, Shopify themselves have been huge advocates of remote staff, calling them remote gurus. And some stats I read, it's estimated that by 2020, up to 50% of staff will be freelancers and work remotely. And some studies show that remote workers are much happier than those chained to a desk Monday to Friday in a 9-to-5 job. And a happy team is up to 20% more productive. I think some interesting statistics. So for us, embracing employees working remotely has been a huge part of our success. Being able to hire who is best for the job rather than employing someone from your location because you need them sitting in front of you in your office dramatically broadens your talent pool. We always felt strongly about hiring people based on talent over location. And for us, it's also brought together a variety of different cultures that has allowed us to create a unique company culture where hopefully our team actually love their work. Cue cheer from the team in the audience. However, there is a big difference between creating and maintaining that team culture with your employees and harmony with your husband. So I was looking for a quote that I felt helped to capture the essence of marriage and also what it takes to be a good leader, and I found this. Marriage, in its truest sense, is a partnership of equals, with neither exercising dominion over the other, but rather with each other encouraging and assisting the other in whatever responsibilities and aspirations he or she might have. So that was said by Gordon Hinckley many years ago. And I'd like to think that Gary and I exercise that sense of partnership and respect that he talks about, but the honest truth is that working with your partner adds layers of complexity that you would never have ever had to consider with normal employees. If you read any article on how to navigate personal and business, and I've pretty much read them all, it's almost an impossible task. Drawing a clear line between the two just isn't realistic as the goalposts move, sometimes hour by hour, and you have to become good at transitioning between them. To me, a successful partnership, either in business or marriage, is when two partners become one. I think the real trouble starts when they decide which one. So Gary and I are not really each other's employees or really even colleagues, but we have a mutual investment in the business with a 50-50 split. There are no two ways about it. Working with him is stressful, tough, and downright infuriating at times. Factor in raising our kids, managing multiple projects across different time zones, supporting our employees and their professional development, things can get complicated to say the least. If HR sat in the same room as us, I suspect Gary and I break myriad workplace guidelines on a daily basis. So finding a strategy on how best to work together and maintaining it is something we've had to work on. And it certainly didn't come easily and still requires effort, thought, and consideration. It's very easy to slip into treading on each other's toes, speaking at each other rather than to each other, and forgetting that you're in a work setting. Sometimes we still find ourselves falling into the trap of overruling one another, displaying a general lack of respect, competitiveness, one-upmanship. It might just be me and Gary, but I think probably lots of people experience that. It's easy to dig your heels in and become indignant that your perspective is the only way. But something I try to remember and accept that neither of us is all-knowing. Together we're definitely stronger. But on the plus side, there's many, many benefits to being in business with your partner. Your partner is that person you totally trust. So having the luxury of bouncing ideas off that person who really understands you is an invaluable asset in business. Working with someone whose vision is totally aligned with yours definitely makes you work harder together for that end goal. And working day in, day out with your partner, seeing the trials and tribulations they may go through over time, definitely gives you greater empathy and patience in supporting them, especially when you're sitting together in the evening listening to their woes. And also knowing they have your back sometimes is all you need to get to the end of a bad day. And another fun upside, you'll always have something to talk about. We never stop talking. So over the years, we've managed to overcome more hurdles than I'd probably care to admit, gone through lots of learning curves, and developed a few strategies along the way to help us navigate our business and personal life. Despite now having quite clear roles, we sometimes still have to assign areas of responsibility based on which of us is most capable at any given time. On a personal note, our youngest child has a learning difficulty and he needs more time from me. So we're able to work around his needs because we both fully understand where each other is at, which certainly helps us maintain a good work-life balance. And being able to switch off can sometimes be impossible, especially as our main studio is on our property. So we try to make a conscious effort to make sure we have quality downtime together. The reality is that we often have to make important decisions at home. In the early days, we used to feel guilty about not keeping work and home separate, but now we've learnt to embrace it really as a necessary part of our lives. So as cliched as it may sound, one of the biggest lessons I've learned over the years of being in business with Gary is to listen and to be flexible. You need to listen before you can respond, and nothing is ever set in stone. So I was just going to summarise some of the strategies that make it work for us. So my first one would be respect. Probably one of the most important ones, but very hard to exercise all the time. It's something that takes a long time to develop and can easily be shattered with a few choice words. Personal and professional respect go hand in hand when running a business with your partner. If you constantly disagree on how to run the business, the chances are you will start to lose respect for each other. And it's very difficult to maintain a marriage once you start showing signs of disrespect in business. And the sad reality is that once it's gone, it's nearly impossible to get back. But once you define your roles clearly, it's much easier to respect each other's boundaries. So, define your roles. When you're in a position to do a skills audit of what your strengths are and what you're best at, and write up a job description detailing your role and areas that you will be responsible for. I have worked on the finance side of things since we began, out of necessity rather than skill or desire. I absolutely hated it. It also took me double the time than it would a qualified bookkeeper, not very efficient at all. I feel like I'm from a creative background and I didn't feel that I was playing to my strengths. So we did that exercise, and now, we have a qualified bookkeeper who works with me on a higher level with the accountant. And I'm firmly back at the front of the business now, maintaining client relationships and strategic planning. It also crucially means that I have the authority in an area I am confident in, and I can be a decision maker within my role, something critical to preventing conflict and treading on each other's toes. Get an independent arbiter. If it's possible, identify a person who can be an independent arbiter for occasions when you reach an impasse, as this will inevitably happen. In our case, our colleague Simon is that person. He has known us for many years and knows our industry, so he is well placed to be in that role for us now. From the beginning, it was my father-in-law, but it could be a good friend, but someone who knows you both well enough to see that both sides as impartially as possible. Have equal commitment. You both need to be equally committed to the business. Even if one might appear to be the driving force, the reality is that both partners need to dedicate an equal amount of time and energy to growing the business. If one is focused on trying to grow the company while the other is content with the way things are, it won't be long before resentment and anger starts to build, which is only going to have a negative effect on the business and potentially the marriage. Share a vision. You need to share a vision for the future of the company. What many people often forget in marriage is that even though you both have committed to spending your lives together, you're still two different people. It's important that you communicate with each other about your vision so that you can be 100% dedicated to making it work. Perhaps one of you want a company that affords a comfortable life while the other wants global domination. A company can't scale when the visions of both founders are not aligned. And learning how to switch off. Running a business is stressful enough at the best of times, and that's without the added pressures of raising kids and maintaining your marriage. But working out how to switch off is vitally important. Everyone has different ways of dealing with it. We try not to talk about work at certain times of the day, like discussing work on a Sunday night, and I still haven't mastered that. I just come up with the best topic on a Sunday night at 10:30, when all you want to do is go to sleep. But basically, the trick is not allowing your entire life to revolve around your business. And I think we need to be masters of forgiveness. Try to remember why you got together in the first place. In the case of a husband and wife, it's because you love each other and you have shared values. So give each other the benefit of the doubt and try and be a master of forgiveness, because it can go a very long way. So just summarising and finishing, I sometimes look back on and wonder how we managed to keep our heads above water, let alone run a business. We've encountered many setbacks and challenges, and for me in particular, something that I've learned through parenting a child with additional needs, running a business, maintaining a marriage, is to not let those challenges define me. I've learned to embrace that adversity, and I've used it to help me build resilience and hopefully improve the way I do things. Thank you very much.